All right, go ahead and roll for perception.
I got a 13.
Hey, that's pretty good. With that, you can tell there's some fantasy situations going on. You hear some adult language, and with that, you can tell this podcast probably isn't for kids. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Dungeoncast. I'm Brian.
And I'm Will.
This is the podcast where we talk about everything Dungeons & Dragons, from killer kobolds to cuddly krakens. And today we're talking about building an encounter.
Prepare yourselves. I cast Fireball. The Dungeoncast.
You just heard our theme song.
Oh, yeah, you did. Okay, Brian, so building an encounter. In this game, specifically in 5th edition, for me personally, I find it to be more of an art and less of a science. And I say that because I come from years of DMing 4th edition, in which it is a mathematical science and it is glorious to build an encounter. And it's so easy and I loved it. And I do love building encounters in 5th edition, but I find that I do have certain issues come up in 5th edition that I didn't in 4th. But before we dive into that, you have recently built some encounters, and you've built some encounters here and there. What's your take? What are the problems that you as a new DM had? And maybe what are some of the things that you found interesting or fun or whatever?
So specifically, we're talking about building a battle encounter. Having a fight.
Yes, we are specifically talking about combat, and that's a good point. Like, not all encounters are combat related, and not all combat encounters are like do or die either. Like,
right.
There are degrees of success and failure when it comes to combat, and not all combat goals necessarily need to be like rout the enemy. It could be something like stop a ritual and our execution execution from happening. Maybe do a single target assassination and get out. Maybe it's retrieve an object or protect an object. Or
like real life, it's not all black and white.
Exactly. So that's a good point. We will be talking mostly about combat, but there's multiple kinds of combat, and there are multiple kinds of encounters, which we'll touch on, I think, more towards the end of the episode. But specifically combat encounters. Yeah,
for me as a DM, I really like. I think one of my favorite things that I got a good chance to try out is fail state boss encounters, when there's something that you know is a big bad guy, and you get pitted up against it, and it's looking slim to none for win, and it is. And you lose, and it was interesting trying not to kill people and just knock them unconscious, because you're supposed to fail, but as from the DM standpoint, I wanted everyone to also live through the fight,
right? For
the purpose of the story.
Yeah, and that could be a tricky thing in general. It could also, like, I don't think it was a problem with our group, and I have no issue with combats like that, but combats that are kind of like that you're supposed to not succeed can really turn players off because they feel railroaded, or they feel like
it is railroading.
It is to a certain extent, but it's also it is and it isn't. Like, the fact of the matter is, there are going to be some things that you can't fucking hack it against, and you need to get over it because you're level 1 or level 2, and you weren't being a jerk by pitting us against that. Like, this dude's not just a problem for us in that moment; he's a problem for the world. Like, you were setting a stage, and I thought you did a great job. But yeah, it can be tricky not killing your players, especially level 1.
I ran the risk of killing everybody.
Yes, you did.
Everybody got very close to death, and some people more than others because of, like, you're level 1 and there's HP differences, and a few hit points extra is a big difference.
Right.
So I had to basically I built a really strong fighter. And which is like, that's a good question that I have for you is, do you build, because I built a character a character sheet,
you did.
And then I threw it into combat, which I think is fine, because most of the monster manual stuff is they've got the table and they have the same stats, but it's a little different.
It's a bit different because they're more based off of a challenge rating, and they have monster features,
right?
But the Dungeon Master's Guide, literally, if you want to go through it, will have options for building NPCs that are characters. So you doing that is not out of the norm at all.
Cool.
It's a little more advanced than, like, a lot of newbie DMs will do.
Yeah, I had to.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so what do I do to make this guy? Because you would have died if he used his normal weapon,
Right.
and he knew that, and
Yeah.
he's like, well, just let me he wasn't necessarily trying to kill you. It's like, well, I'll just show them what I can do with this piece of shit sword.
Right.
So that's how I nerfed him. I'm like, I'm going to give you this sword that has less damage output.
Right.
Basically.
And that's a good way to do it. The way you did it was more complex than you needed to, but also it's pretty fitting for what I can already tell is going to be a long-standing NPC. For your more prominent NPCs, maybe you do want to build them like a player character. But like what you could have done also, and for future ideas, is in the back of the monster manual and in the back of the Volo's guide, there are like certain templates, or they're basically monster blocks, but for people.
Yeah,
and
okay.
like there'll be archetypes, like you could have used the veteran or the champion or the knight archetype. Those would have been like challenge 3s and 5s and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay.
It would have been around the same. And rather than having to piece something together, it's something you could slap down. It just makes things quicker. But again, that comes with its own complications, which we can talk about.
Yes, and
later.
like when I found that when I was building the encounter, I figured out like how much safety there is in numbers, because it was a 5-on-1 fight.
Yep.
And you guys, I found out, could have won.
Yep. And that's why some monsters have legendary actions.
Yes, that's
and
basically
layers as well.
Yeah, it makes more. It's basically like there's one creature with one pool of HP, but other things are happening to stand in as if there were more enemies in the room.
Yeah. Now, and so what you're talking about is called action economy, and it's when you have a group versus a solo, it really messes with the balance. And action economy is a huge thing you have to consider when you're building an encounter, because how many creatures do you pit against these people? How many don't you?
And which creatures are they?
Yeah, exactly. And what can all your many or very few players even do? When it comes to action economy, crap, I've lost track of what I was going to say.
It's okay. Let's jump back into this fight. I was getting
it'll come back to me.
We'll get back to it. This guy he had a great sword. I gave him a short sword, and that seemed to do the trick. It seemed to shave off the necessary damage. Okay, he'll do like between 10 and 15, and that's generally what your guys.
Yeah, that'll one shot most of us. If not all of
and I'm
us,
like, okay, cool. One attack will do the job, and then he won't attack you again because you're unconscious, and I won't run the risk of making you go double into the negative your HP and die instantly. So the fight probably wasn't going to last enough turns for you guys to even fail your death saves, even though I thought it might have.
Yes, but also it was good thinking, because you were planning on him taking us out so quickly we wouldn't have 3 extra rounds. And you were right, because 3 extra rounds, that's a lot of movement. That's a lot of things happening.
Lot of time, yeah.
So yeah.
And then I found out that numbers is an issue. So when I was pitting you up against I basically reskinned like skeletons and and what are the other and zombies? That's the one. They had I made 2 different groups, and I threw them into the thing. I was like, okay, these guys are a little weaker, but they have like double the HP, and so they'll take a couple more hits. But these guys, they'll put out more damage, and like, oh, we got to take that guy out because he's like doing X amount of damage.
Right. So you're like balancing all these things, and like also things that you don't necessarily have experience with, and like at the same time, even when you've been DMing for a while, it's like all these variables. It can be hard to like, is this hard enough? Is this too hard? What am I doing?
Yes,
and that's where I feel like 5th edition is more of an art than a science. I mean, you have things like challenge ratings to help you.
They're not always.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say. This is what I was going to say about action economy. This ties back into it. So with these challenge ratings, it's supposed to give you like a rule of thumb for like how you can pit them against the player. And the Dungeon Master's Guide literally has like rules for like, okay, if you want it to be an easy fight, it could be up to this much experience points worth of monsters.
Okay.
And then there's like a formula for if you have extra monsters and or less monsters. There's like it's this confusing formula, and in the end it doesn't matter because it tends to be super underpowered. And
yes, that's what I've been finding is if I throw a challenge rating at like the appropriate for the table, my players almost always just
stomp it,
just tear straight through it. But I'm always scared because I'm like, I don't want to throw too much at you guys. It's not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the problems with the formula, and this goes back to action economy, is it bases all of its math on the fact that you probably have anywhere from 3 to 5 players.
Yes.
If you have more than that or less than that, you automatically really can't use it.
Generally, that's the amount of players you're going to have at the table.
It is definitely the most common, but as you've seen, there are games with like 8 players. There's sometimes games with like 2 players.
And kudos to you guys, because as an adult in the real world, it is very hard to plan 8 people to sit down at a table on one day.
I can't imagine
at
it.
a time.
Oh my Jesus! Like even just running a game with 8 people, that's just I couldn't do it. I'm
that
sorry.
freaking meme where it's like, I will be your that scene from Lord of the Rings, and at the end it's like, I can't make the 5th. What was that?
Yeah,
that was your sword. I'll be your bow.
Yeah, and my bow, and the 5th isn't great for me.
Yeah.
That was I cracked up. One of the cool. Okay, so there's a cool tool out there when it comes to this DMG formula for like what you can throw at the party, and it's a website called Kobold Fight Club, and I use it very heavily because I can quickly. It has everything cataloged in there, all their challenge ratings, and you just plug in like how many players you have, what's their level, and then it'll give you it'll color code the monsters in such a way.
I've used that. That's right. When I one shot in your campaign, I use that site.
Yeah, it's very useful in as far as it helps you like slap together an encounter, and it lets you know what the DMG would rate this fight. And then what I do is I just boost that up a bit because I know you guys can take it.
Okay, yeah.
Because again, in fifth edition, for some reason, that formula, it's too weak.
I feel like it doesn't take into account, like, did somebody just cast Bless? Okay, you basically at the lower levels just leveled up.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's because of the nature of the game, because 5th edition is much more freeform. It's hard to take all that into variation. Like you don't know what, and that kind of responsibility when it comes to building your encounter falls upon the dungeon master. It's your job as dungeon master to know your players, know their features, know their spells, know what they can do, know when they need, which characters need short rests and which characters need long rests. Like you need to know these things because you got to take them into account when you're building an encounter. Yes,
especially on depends on like how many encounters are you building and what is the timeline that you're trying to cram them into.
Yes,
like because game to game, if you have a 4-hour session, 4 hours of time didn't necessarily go by. You might have had a time jump and the players had a short or long rest. This amount of time went by, you rested.
Yeah.
Or like, are you crawling through a dungeon and did you or did you not short rest? Because now I need to know if that's what you're doing.
Yes, it's very true. You need to also keep in mind not just all the things we talked about, but like you're saying, like you need like how many encounters are you cramming into a specific space of game time? Because if they're going to get into 4 encounters without a short rest in between, like you might then need to start falling back on that formula that might be a little bit more that's softer than what they normally need, but like you need to spread out that danger or they're gonna fucking start dying.
Yeah
because characters can be very fragile, especially at beginning levels. 1 to 3 is like you guys are so damn fragile.
Yeah, but unless you have a healer and a bard in the same party,
that support makes
holy
a difference.
Crap, man.
Absolutely. Well, think about
Insane.
it. We got 2 tanks
compared to not having
we got 2 tanks in the party, both of which deal decent damage, and then we have 2 super supportive characters, a bard and a cleric, that are really dedicated to supporting those tanks, and then a rogue that has just been rolling like
what
a beast.
Monster! Yeah, just the sneak attack.
Yeah,
I was like,
she has been killing
sneak
motherfuckers.
Attack?
Yeah,
it does how many?
Yeah, sneak attack.
And the way she used the sneak attack, I was like, whoa,
it was cool.
That's totally good.
It was super dope. Yeah. So yeah, and that's why you got to know your players, and you need to do. When I say know your players, you need it for 2 reasons. You need it, one, so that you can exploit their weaknesses and make them feel danger and have to think outside the box when it counts, and also know what their strengths are so that you can also play to their strengths and help them feel really badass at certain moments of time. You know, like D'Artagnan has fire resistance. I'm sure at some point we're going to fight some lava monsters or something.
Yeah.
And like D'Artagnan's going to be like, I got this. Like, don't even worry. Like, I'm going to resist half their shit.
Yeah. I'll stand up front and take it.
Because combat, serves more than just EXP. As a matter of fact, me as a DM, I completely and utterly ignore EXP when it comes to monsters.
Yeah.
I do not count it. For me, it's more of a story-driven
I kind of
leveling
feel it
experience. Yeah. When it feels right, when you guys have experienced enough, when some character changes have happened, it's time to level up, guys.
That's what I'm leveling up is more than I feel like in my campaign, leveling up is more than just experience.
Exactly.
Experience points. It's experience, but it's like I traveled and I met these people and I learned from my mistakes.
For me, leveling, and I think you're agreeing here, is it's a non-quantifiable thing.
Yes.
It's
well, it is and it isn't. Like it just depends on your approach.
Right.
So
And that's the thing. I'm not knocking using experience. I mean, hell, those rules are there for a reason, and they've been there since the beginning. So if you do that, like, by all means, that's awesome. But I just don't. I don't think it fits for the way I tell stories and the way that like. We play the game.
Yeah, I'm kind of letting the story tell itself in a way, and I'm throwing planned things in there, but so much unplanned stuff happens. And I understand a DM being like, okay, I'm going to have I'm going to plan this fight and it'll be this many experience points. And when they beat that, they'll go on this part of the campaign and then they'll do this fight and it'll be this many experience points. And that's enough to level them up. And they just continue to do that. Right. Like it's very mathematically plotted out. And I like math, but not that much.
Yeah. I'm the same way. One thing about, so I want to talk a little bit about 4th edition just because I have so much experience with it and I do miss some of the things from 4th.
Well, it's easy. I think it's good that we talk a lot about 4th, or you talk a lot about 4th edition, because it's the building blocks of the new edition. You know, they take
There are some things from 4th. For 5th edition, it's mostly built off all the editions before 4th.
Yeah, I mean that like every iteration of D&D is
does build on it.
Yeah, it's a learning curve for the creators, I'm sure too, and they want to make something new and
definitely.
fresh.
I think a lot of the things about 5th are because there were so many things about 4th that people didn't like, or maybe didn't hold true to the game, so they learned a lot from that experience. But one of the things about 4th edition was your DM tools for encounter building and monster building were fucking phenomenal. And much like how the characters in 4th edition had roles for combat, so you had like defender, controller, leader, and striker.
Right.
So basically, like you had your DPS, your support, your battle control, and your tanking. There were similar roles on the monster side of things, except for there was like 6 or 7 of them. You had leaders, you had controllers, you had artillery, you had brutes, you had skirmishers, you had lurkers, and they each served a different purpose. And also, like they literally had levels that were the same as the leveling system for characters, and you had options for, like, let's say you had kobolds. You probably had kobold options anywhere from level 1 all the way to like level 12, which is a big range for kobolds. And I personally feel like that was a much cooler way of doing it, because, like, okay, I know that in 5th edition an orc is supposed to be an orc, and that no matter what level, an orc's an orc.
Right.
But in my experience, like, okay, and what I'm trying to say is the game is designed in such a way so that if a bunch of orcs show up while you're level 10 or 11, you can't just ignore them. They're still, a little bit of a threat.
Like,
and I say,
address it.
Not in my experience, because you guys fucking tromped through fucking orcs when you were level 5. Like, like they were fucking nothing to you. I was like, Jesus.
And they outnumbered us.
And they outnumbered you. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, like, I understand that was the goal, but in my experience, it hasn't really worked very well. And I remember very distinctly in 4th edition, I had like, there was like level 1 to 3 orcs, and then there was like more buffed up like level 10 to 11 orcs. Like I can mix and match it.
Oh, well, here's on that note, here's some good advice for any DM out there, which more seasoned DMs will know, is know your players.
Yeah,
because
know your players.
What Jake started doing when we were playing your game was talking to me a lot about the combat encounters and be like, okay, what does your guy do? And I'd tell him, and he was like, my guy does this. What if we did this in combat? And basically me and Jake had role play campfire about how we were going to address fights. And he was like trying to get really strategic and really like max out like like placement and damage output and be like, well, if they attack us from this angle and blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, this is bordering on min-maxing, but I feel like this is also
it's super metagaming. Like
yes,
super metagaming.
but it's also in character for for
that's
a
why it's
fighter
okay.
and a paladin to like wanna
not
be
just that. Like, okay, so Rohan, your fighter, is very strategic, and it's all about prowess and combat capability.
Yes.
So it makes sense on his part. And then on Glader's part, Jake's part, his character is literally a military captain. He's about tactics.
Exactly.
So it does make sense.
And he almost took it to the point where he was gonna take some feats or something like that to be like, I want to do this combo. And then I thought about like this
now
sounds
we're
like
getting into like it's too extreme metagaming.
and it's cool to do that, but it like I understand wanting to do the combo, but like just make sure you're in character. But I know now running a game where Jake is in it, he was straight up talking to our healer character Sandy about like because I was sitting so far away from you guys the way we have the table set up. I was like, what are you guys talking about? And Jake's like, don't worry about it, man.
Oh yeah, I remember you.
They were doing strategy, and I was like, that's fine.
And that was not.
I'm ready for it.
I'm talking to you, Jake. Stop the metagaming, bro. But if you're ready for it, you know it's your game, it's our game. So you know, hell yeah. If you're into it, hell yeah.
And also,
I don't mind
it wasn't just like him trying to. In his defense, Sandy's new, so it's like, hey, Sandy, don't forget that you can do this. And as a cleric, you should know that you should be doing this or can do this.
Right.
So there's that. Fighting makes me very tired, though.
Yeah, I agree. I'm honestly getting worn out by all these revelations of what Jake's doing behind my back.
Maybe 1 hour's worth of maybe a nap.
Yeah. Let's take a short rest.
Let's do it.
All right.
You made it to the part of the show where we talk about ourselves and we talk about you. Let's start with you. Thank you for watching our show. We really appreciate you guys, and we really appreciate all the following we have and all the following that we hope you want to help us get by telling your friends about the Dungeoncast.
Please do.
Yeah.
You guys rock. And so again, we record these ahead of time. So by the time this episode airs, it'll probably be 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks after the fact. But we finally have pulled and announced the winners of our contest for Tales from the Yawning Portal. It's already been announced on Twitter, but we want to do a quick shout out here on the show and thank...
we got Maddie Knickerbocker and Ben Dignan.
Yeah, both tweeted out about the show, and we drew both their names. And yeah, congrats, guys. Thanks again. Thanks for tweeting out about the show, and thanks to everyone who was part of the contest. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We appreciate all of the people that were tweeting the link out to the show. That's the goal here for us, is to
spread the word,
provide good content, and spread the word about it so we can get people watching the show. So thank you guys. That really helped a lot. And of course, thanks. Will's the one that's getting the books together and sending all that out. So thanks to him. He's getting you guys some nice brand new D&D books.
No problemo.
Yeah. So
other than that, you can find us on soundcloud.com/The Dungeoncast. We're on YouTube. All you got to do is search The Dungeoncast. And we're also on iTunes and pretty much any other place you can find podcasts. And again, if you want to follow us on Twitter, I'm usually doing polls and stuff and announcing what episodes are coming up. And if you want to be part of all that, just follow us on Twitter. We're at The Dungeoncast. And I think that's it.
Oh, other than drop that hot iTunes review for us, guys.
Ooh, yes,
we could
please.
use those.
Yeah, definitely. If you got the time and you like the show, I mean, just say, great show. Great job.
Literally anything will do.
Yeah, we'd appreciate it. It'd help us out a lot.
Yeah, and if you do have that positive feedback, negative feedback, constructive criticism, I prefer the constructive criticism to anything else, really. If you got it, let us know. Drop it anywhere. I don't care.
Yeah, you can email us at the Dungeoncast@gmail.com. Please email us by all means.
Yeah, you got any questions, anything you want us to address on the show, let us know. And yeah, that's all I got.
All right. End of the short rest. Let's get back to the show.
Back to the show.
We good?
We're up and running.
We're up and running. All right. So we talked a bit about knowing your players. Now, what I want to talk about now is know your monsters. It can be really easy to be like, I want them to fight gnolls here, so I'll just slap some gnolls at them and follow
do you
the formula.
Do you really know?
But do you really know? Do you know what they can do? A monster is more than its CR rating or just CR challenge rating. More than its challenge rating. It's also in the things it can do. Its damage output, its HP.
It's also you, because you're controlling as a DM. You're controlling that monster.
It's more than even just the features. It's also the tactics that you're using,
and you kind of got to know it a little bit. Like maybe do you have? Are we going to talk about reskinning at any point?
Yeah, towards the end we'll probably talk
we'll get
about
to
it.
that
Or we
later.
can talk about it now if you want. What do you got to say?
Okay, I reskinned. I basically I want to talk about that Hellhound I made.
Yes.
So I took a Hellhound, the basic, whatever's in the dungeon in the monster manual, and I just added like Hydra stuff to it. I just plugged in like the Hydra mechanic. I gave it 2 extra heads and it had some extra attacks. And Hellhounds have this like cone attack. And I was like, okay, so when that fight was really interesting and I learned a little bit about myself, I was like, what is this? I was trying to be the Hellhound. And I was like, no, that's wrong, because I'm not the Hellhound. The Hellhound is its own creature. And even though it was like basically like born right there or whatever,
it's created.
It had its own. It basically had like the mentality of the brains inside of it,
Right. Okay. It has its own agency and it's going to run off its own intelligence, and that's what you're saying.
It was an instinctual creature.
You have to role play it.
Yes, exactly.
Role play your monsters. Role play does not end at the initiative roll. Role play is probably even more important in combat than maybe outside sometimes, because it can change the flow of the tide of battle.
As a person in combat, you're pushing your limits. It's really going to show you what your core essential pieces of yourself are. Is it fight or flight? If you're an adventurer, it's usually fight.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Another thing to say is kind of on the reverse side of that, tactics are important as a dungeon master. Some of these creatures have entire features built around tactics, built around being close to or far away from their fellow combatants.
Yes, like the Hellhound. It had pack tactics.
There we go. And then there's a lot like goblins get that too, or like they're stronger together.
Yes, you get advantage on attacks and things like that, or more reach, or there's lots of different stuff.
Yeah,
right?
And because they have those features, that tells me is that's the way these creatures think. They stick together. They fight in a pack, and it makes a difference. So I said it in the goblins episode, when it comes to making goblins, more than just cannon fodder, is play the goblin as a goblin. They're gonna strike and dip out. They're gonna do guerrilla tactics. They're gonna try their best to stay alive. They're not gonna rush in.
And that's why it's important to know the lore of the creatures.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to have an idea of what, if you are going to use goblins, you want to know what the history of goblins is and how goblins act, and how are goblins. It's also how are goblins acting in your world.
Yeah.
Add your own spin on it, a little flavor.
Absolutely. And when it comes to, again, I said, roleplay doesn't stop at the initiative roll. I think that's really important, because a lot of times players too, they just dive in and start killing stuff. But like, I want to encourage my players, which is fun. I want to encourage my players though that there's more to. There's strategy, there's skill checks. Sometimes there's dialogue. You got to keep it quick, because again, these are 6-second rounds.
Right.
But like, these things do happen in a fight. Like, there's more than just, I do X move or X spell, and they do X move or X spell, and it's more than that. And
there could be a scenario where your character isn't apt to want to kill. Maybe you want to leave these creatures alive because it's not who you are. Like, if you can spare them, you will. Yeah. Tell your friends. Tell them what happened here this day.
Absolutely.
Get the fuck out of here.
You're not worth killing.
Yes. Or stuff like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So and that's it's a trope, but I mean it's a trope for a reason.
Well, the creature, is it the kind of creature that'll get up to be like, hell no, I'm gonna try to. I know I lost. I'm gonna just go for it anyway. Or is it gonna run away and go tell its friends? Or like what? You gotta remember that this thing has a brain probably, and like emotions.
Absolutely. Another thing too is when you're building your encounter, to keep this in mind, don't be boring. Like, spice it up, make it zesty. Like, there's more than just the monsters and the players. There is the entire environment surrounding them, the difficult terrain, cover, exotic terrain, traps. Like, all these things will meld together to make a really interesting combat. And you got all these tools, you might as well use them. They're so much fun.
Environment is good. If you want to use something like pack tactics, you need a closer environment to because like who knows, maybe somebody will drop dissonant whispers on your shit and make it run away.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you could literally like box canyon people in and like
Right, yeah,
you can't go
absolutely.
anywhere and
Yeah.
like, you got to fight your way out
And
of a
you
corner.
got artillery up on the ledges, and they can't even get to them. And it's like, what do they do? Like,
That's
yeah.
like legendary actions right there. Some
Yeah,
artillery
basically,
you can't reach.
basically, yeah, absolutely. You know, like I said, spice it up. There's all kinds of exotic terrain, anything from just running water, deep water, to magma, like spores that give off like a poison gas, ooze, like, you know, sticky, like what's it called? It's an adhesive. It's sovereign glue. Like sovereign glue can be laid out and like, you know, fuck people up. Like, you know, like I said, spice it up. Try different elevations. You know, like again, that brings in like ranged weapons more prominently and forces characters to do things like climb for a turn and stuff like that. There's no reason it needs to be boring. You got all these tools. Like I said, spice it up, make it zesty.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really like using the environment to my advantage as a DM, and I don't think I've done that enough. I was thinking about it in this last fight. I was like, man, everything I've done has been so like open room. Like,
Right.
oh, it's a boss encounter, and I grew up playing platformers and 2D scrollers and stuff, and you go through that last door, and there's just this big empty
open
room,
room.
and
Yeah.
there's the guy you're gonna fight, and I'm like,
yeah.
that's in a lot of ways that's really fucking cool, and I love that.
Right.
But it, you know, there's
more to it
all
than
these
that.
other things that you can implement, and why not do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So after you've built your encounter and you've taken all these things into consideration and you got like the perfect encounter built, sometimes you want to go a little bit more above and beyond when it comes to creating an atmosphere while you're running an encounter. And for me, that usually almost across the board entails atmosphere of music. I always bring music to my D&D games. I am a huge proponent for battle theme music.
Oh, yeah.
It gets the blood pumping. You know, and I usually use different stuff for different situations, so that's like scenario appropriate, and it just really like, you know, much like a movie uses music to like
Yeah, to get
really
that
suck you
ambiance
in.
going.
Yeah, you want that ambiance.
And that's for the players to get the players into it, to get you into it.
Yeah. Some people don't like using music. Yeah, that's fine too. And there's other ways you can bring atmosphere into it. You can change the lighting of your room, especially if it's like a horror or spooky type of thing. Maybe do it by candlelight. You know, some people like to bring atmosphere by having like really, really detailed, drawn out maps of the encounter. Like, I think that's awesome too. I usually don't, because I'm not capable of bringing that, but I am capable of like playing some music in the background. So, you know, atmosphere makes a big difference too to make these encounters memorable. I think they're important.
Yeah, always let your imagination go with it too. Like don't fight the scene, you know.
Yeah.
Just let yourself role play it, you know. It like experience the encounter, do what you think your character would do, and it's gonna really heighten the experience, you know. Just like let yourself go to it, if you will.
One thing I want to talk about just a little bit here is random tables. Like, they are a tradition that goes way back in D&D. I'm not always the biggest fan of random tables, because I'm more of a fan of like an encounter should mean something. Like, you know, encounters for
There's
me,
probably a reason you're getting into a fight. Usually to the death. As
they're
far as I've been
less
experienced.
random. They're more along the lines of, these are the circumstances of the area. This is the circumstances of the story, and this is the culmination of everything. And this is why this specific type of creature is here, or this group of people is here, or whatever. But that doesn't say I don't use random tables, because sometimes you guys are truly just out in the wilderness, and I'm not sure what I want to throw at you, but I have an idea for like a few different things. So I'll make my own little random tables of what's in the environment, and fuck it, let's just see what happens.
See, that's cool.
Sometimes I do want to just spice it up with randomness. But like, I usually, that's only like 10% of all my encounters, if that, run off a random table. Some people run nothing but random tables.
See, I like
which is cool, but not my style.
D&D has a lot of fantastic options as far as the monster manual goes, and I wanted to ask you if you've ever tried to build encounters that are just like, you're walking through the jungle and a fucking jaguar like jumps out of the tree and fucking attacks the shit out of you.
Yeah, sometimes that shit happens. Like, absolutely.
You just got surprise rounded.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, well, let's talk about surprise rounds and stuff like that.
Another way to spice it up is, you know, ambushes. Again,
Yes.
we're kind of back to the tactics bit. Goblins are going to run an ambush orcs probably gonna run an ambush too if they can. Like, why wouldn't they? They're not about like honor and stuff like that usually, not usually.
Right.
So I mean, and that's one way. If you feel like your players it's getting kind of hard to challenge them, fucking ambush them. You get a free round that knocks them down a little bit.
Yeah, that'll really cripple a lot of characters, especially like a support style character. They don't want to take that damage right off the bat for free.
Nope.
And that's funny because you were really good about being like, okay, you guys set up camp. You doing anything tonight?
Right.
Are you sure you're not? You're all just going to bed then? Like, no. Like, and I knew from reading stories and stuff about adventuring and things, fantasy essentially, that when you're on a journey, you should probably set up watch, especially when you have enemies.
Yeah. It's a harsh world out there, and
bandits, whatever.
Yeah, you guys got gear.
What's the best way to steal shit from people?
Yeah.
Well, when they're not awake, they can't fight you.
It's very true. Very true.
So if you're doing a surprise round and like, let's say a party is new to adventuring and does not set up a watch or something like that, if like what, because in reality, like a bandit could come up in the middle of the night, and if you're asleep, they could just cut your throat, and that's that.
Yeah,
so this is where the mechanics of D&D kind of like, I feel like, oh well, they use the knife on you. That's only a D4.
Yeah. So 4th edition had a really cool mechanic called the coup de grace, where if the enemy was helpless and you managed to hit their AC, it was an auto crit. And crits were devastating, especially if it was like a striker that was hitting you. So like it wouldn't maybe quite a killing blow, but it would be devastating. So it made it feel more real. 5th edition doesn't really have that. I'd probably implement the coup de grace, but even then, crits in this game, they kind of the scale isn't the same as 4th edition. So sometimes there'll be a one-shot kill. Sometimes they won't be. It just kind of depends.
Depends on the creature, and like there are a lot of factors that go into play.
I would definitely
AC.
implement a coup de grace for if you guys are asleep. I'm sorry, like it's gonna be a coup de grace scenario, and
that sounds fair to me because like if we're talking about like keeping this in, as close to, we're in this fantasy based world with like these imaginary mechanics that we're implementing. Where are we drawing the line?
Right.
Well, dude, if you're asleep, man, and like a bandit is gonna come up and try to murder you in your sleep, he's gonna do a pretty good job because you're asleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so whatever you got to do to flavor that out to make it right, see, just as long as it feels right,
Yeah. Do what feels right. Do what's most fun. Do what's right for you guys.
And most importantly, set a watch.
Yeah, set a watch. Set a watch because
we've been good about setting
things
watches.
will come and get you in the night.
Yes, they will.
So we talked a little bit at the beginning of this episode about not all encounters are combats. And not all combats are
encounters.
Well,
no,
no, they are. But not all combats are combats if you use something I use called the skill challenge, which is a remnant from 4th edition, which I've revamped.
Not all combats are combats.
Yes,
like
exactly.
In-game, like mechanical combats.
Sometimes you want to go a more theatrical route for whatever reason. Sometimes just because you're swamped for time, or it could be a myriad of reasons. I use the skill challenge style that Rodrigo uses in the podcast Critical Hit, which I watched for like the first 200 and something episodes because it was really good, and it's still good. I just kind of fell off, but the way I run skill challenges, again, this is from 4th edition, but it works perfectly in 5th edition, is you have your players roll their initiatives, and then you run through their turns as you would in a normal combat encounter, but rather than you running it like combat, they say what they want to do in a very cinematic kind of sense.
Yes. And
I will usually decide on the spot what role that would fall under, whether like it's a skill check or maybe just a raw ability score check. And you can either succeed or fail depending on the DC that I set. And X amount of successes equals you've beaten the skill challenge and gotten to the goal that you wanted to, and you have either won the combat or whatever it is.
Yeah, cinematic cutscene, whatever you want to call it, has ended, and you have come out on top.
Exactly, and then X amount of failures means you fail, and that can mean different things.
Yeah,
I'm probably not going to do skill challenges in a life or death scenario because that's not cool. If you're gonna like put your characters'
literally,
lives
it's almost
super in danger, then you need to give them a fighting chance to get out of that.
Because the skill challenge is like death saves.
Yeah.
I mean, the death, it's usually in skill challenges I've been in with you, it's you have a higher rate to fail because it's less, what was it? It's like a 5 to 3, like
It's
5
usually
successes
a
or 3
higher
failures.
Success ratio, yeah. And honestly, like you guys just have really bad rolls when it comes to skill challenges.
Well, it's also about saying, I mean, if you're like, oh, I want to like do a barrel roll and like throw my knife and kick this guy, well, and the knife is in him and like jam that thing, like it's like, okay, give me a dex and it's gonna be a DC like 16 maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like the things
it
you
all
say
varies. It's a group endeavor, and like the only way skill challenges work is if the whole group's on board for a skill challenge and everyone can be kind of cinematically minded. Because I've tried to run skill challenges in groups before where they're just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
it's like that kills the skill challenge pretty quick.
It can be kind of hard, and as somebody who's done it, I can a few times at this point, I can tell you that one of the things you can do to succeed a skill challenge, because you want to succeed, and you don't want to mid max it, but this is a good medium area. I feel like is don't do anything outside of what your character can do. I mean, is your character going to try and jump over somebody? Like that might sound really cool and be what you want to do, but like
Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah,
Don't
like the high ground is important, and you want to respect it. You don't want to lose those limbs like that.
Yeah. But yeah, skill challenges are sometimes a fun theatrical way to run through combat, and I've had much success with them. I like them a lot. I think they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, dude,
they're not for everybody.
You got a +5 in acrobatics. Do some acrobatics.
Yeah,
because you're gonna have
some skills.
Yeah, like
the only rules that I implement are the ones that again come from Critical Hit, where I don't allow a player to roll the same skill twice in a row,
right?
And they're also not allowed to roll the same skill as the person who went before them.
Cool.
Just it keeps it. Keeps it interesting, keeps it fresh, and makes characters have to think.
Yeah, I have a +6 in athletics. I'm gonna keep using that +6. Like, no, you're not.
Yeah, I honestly feel like 5th edition is a better edition for skill challenges, because in 5th edition, again, the numbers are crunched down on both ends, so that like even if you only have a +3 in a skill, like you have a reasonable amount of chance.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad. While in 4th edition, especially the higher levels you got, like those skills that you weren't trained in just basically become useless.
Yeah, I always try to think of my my numbers that I have on my character sheet. I compare them to an average roll, which would be a 10, the middle ground.
Right.
My 10s on this skill all become 13s. That's
right.
Gonna pass a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's all I got left for combat. If off the top of my head, unless you have any other questions or things you want to bring up about building a combat encounter.
I have a question about doing ranged combats, like with if you don't have a character that has any kind of, if you have a party that doesn't have much range attack, how many times are you putting characters with primarily like range attack type things going on? Like,
I don't stray from it too much. I mean, in all honesty, that it becomes a thing that players got to think themselves out of or prepare for ahead of time when they realize it's a problem.
Because I'm gonna segue a little bit. It's like, okay, so you are going into an area and you're a foreigner. You probably maybe you're not supposed to be here.
Okay.
And there are guard that are archers, and they're up on like an area you can't get to, like maybe up on a rock face or something like that.
Better start running.
Yeah, exactly. when do you? Let's talk about running away from encounters a little bit.
Okay.
Like, how does that work?
Well, there's the dash action.
Yes.
Which is one thing, and so I'll probably, if they're in combat, we'll start there, and after that, if it gets to the point where the combat mechanics are making the whole thing cumbersome, we drop initiative and we start doing just role playing it out.
There you go.
Skill checks and stuff like that. Yeah.
So when combat is no longer feasible, that's when we will end the initiative. Like basically, the mechanics of combat will strip it away and go back to role playing like normal.
Yeah, and you got to remember that these mechanics are just there to help the whole thing out. Like they're not like actual physics a lot of the time, like especially when it comes to combat mechanics. Like it's just
Right.
a way to translate what's actually happening.
Yes, we need to quantify certain things so that combat, like, can take place. These actions are all supposed to take place on the same turn, essentially, like in the same space of time. But you can't really do that.
Yeah, there's and there's other systems out there that approach that differently.
Like when Magnus is like, I'm gonna light a fire on the Adventure Zone.
It's like you're gonna what? That's gonna take a while.
Come on, Griffin, let me do it. No.
Yeah.
Like what?
So when it comes to like, okay, so I mean,
Like, how do I end basically what I'm asking is, how do I end a combat without like beating somebody, without winning? I can run away.
Yeah.
Is there anything else there? Is there something I'm missing?
You can maybe scare the enemy away.
You make them run away.
Yeah, I mean,
So basically you get so far apart that the combat isn't happening anymore.
yeah, and it becomes a chase, and there are chase mechanics, but I mean, generally you're just gonna like have some skill checks,
You run
and,
after them.
check people's speed
Or not,
movements and stuff
maybe
like that.
maybe you're cool with them getting away.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's the point where, because you can get to a point where you drop your enemy down, like what we were talking about earlier, to a place like they're at like 3 HP, and whatever you do, they're gonna take at least that much damage and go down. Oh, that's unfortunate. And
yeah, we had some technical difficulties on the video side of
that's the
things.
second time that's happened. We
Yeah,
really got to
it's
figure that
odd.
out.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, basically what's gonna happen? Maybe I can just.
No, I said storage full, bro. Is it going?
Yeah, it's probably recording on the normal.
Oh, there we go. All right.
We're
There you go.
back.
We're back.
Well, I'm back.
Oh, for a second, you were gone, but you're back. All right.
Well, basically what I was saying was, if you want that guy, hey, run away and tell all your friends about this. Combat has basically ended at that point if that creature decides to run away. Like basically, like, can you role play your way out of combat? Can you like?
Sure, absolutely.
Because actions.
Yeah, you can call a parlay or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like
totally, absolutely.
Speech is free action, so you can just like.
True.
How does it break down? Okay, it's my turn in combat and then in the initiative, and I want to basically try to have a conversation with my enemy, like, "Hey, let us go. We'll give you gold, whatever."
Yeah, if it's going to be like extensive dialogue, you're going to spend your turn doing it. 'Cause,
Okay.
I'll allow like 1 or 2 lines, but
There you go.
These rounds are going, and you can make persuasion checks or whatever, and role play it out and all that stuff. And yeah, like not all combat's got to end in death. It's true.
Cool. Okay, so, what if? So here's a scenario. I do well on my persuasion check. Hey, I'll give you 500 gold if you just like drop this and let us go.
Yeah.
And that enemy's like, that sounds good, but I also want your sword. And then at this point, I feel like we've gone over the couple of lines of leeway here.
I would allow, like, at that point, you got a decision to say yes or no. But if you're going to like try and bargain again, now you're spending your turn.
And then it's the next person's turn, and they're like, wait, I want to, and it's your party. They're like, wait, I want to see where this goes.
What do you mean?
Like, they're like, I don't want to take my turn. I want them to finish their conversation.
No, you can ready an action. Well, like, okay, I'm not going to. Okay, so let's go back through what you just said. Like, one player's like, I'll give you 500 gold if you let me go, and he's like, that's cool, but I want your sword too. At that point, the player can make a decision to either keep the dialogue going or make their action. If they decide to just be like, okay, well, if they decide to start bargaining at that point, they can spend their turn doing that.
Okay.
Like that, their turn doesn't just end there. It's like, but they have to make a decision to either continue the negotiation or say fuck the negotiation and now attack.
So my turn will be spent. So maybe they work it out, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna
that
peace
might
out.
end it right there. Yeah.
Okay, and then it's like it's either a yes or no at that point. So
Yeah.
that's a good way to handle it.
Yeah, that's how I would.
Cool.
Well, if that's it, I think that's all we got for our encounters. So I hope that helped you guys out there when it came to building your encounters and getting creative with it. But yeah.
Yeah, cool. Let's call it a game right there. I don't got
let's
nothing
call it
else.
a game.
See you guys
All
next
right,
time.
you guys have a good one.